Clear and concise writing is the goal of pretty much every writer, especially academics, where poor writing can prevent us from publishing our papers and from getting our grants funded. So to address this video is going to walk you through my 5-step so what test that is going to help bring clarity and reduce redundancy in your writing. As a bonus, if you are struggling with the word count of your document, stick around to the end of the video for my extra 6th tip that is going to help you reduce the word count of your document. Works like magic, and especially if you have a lot of words to cut and you're struggling using any other technique. So if you're ready, let's get started. When I was a newbie writer and I was trying to figure out what things meant like concise writing or clear writing, I was looking around on the internet, I was Googling, I was trying to find examples, and so many just say, you need to write concise, you need to write clear, you need to write whatever adjectives they're using in ways that were not helpful to me. I didn't know what made something clear or what made it concise or how to determine this for myself, which is an important point as a graduate student. Now, a lot of tips also focus on the English language, wanting you to perfect your use of English or your use of grammar. So here's a little secret. Clear, concise, interesting academic writing does not have to have perfect English, okay? Here, we want to focus on writing such that our words fall to the background and don't even matter in our reader's brain anymore. We want them focused on the concepts behind our writing and not thinking about our writing at all. This means we don't want it to be super dense, full of lots of technical words and concepts that are going to be difficult to follow, that might need a lot of explanation that we might not have the space to provide. And on the contrary, we want to avoid very flowery, over-the-top language that's going to add a lot of words to our document, but is maybe not going to add the clarity that we think we're adding with this. So here we want to find maybe something in the middle. We want to have nice language that people don't have to think about, but at the same time, we want to make sure that all of the concepts and terms and everything that we're talking about in our document, we have the space to expand on those and make sure the reader knows exactly what we want them to know through the use of these words, these terms, these concepts, whatever. Just a quick note before we get started on how I would like you to use this test. I want you to go through your document, whatever you're working on right now, read through it and find at least one sentence where your attention is starting to wane, where you're starting to think of something else, where you're starting to move your focus away from the paper. Flag that sentence. This is a great place to start. With this so what test, walk through the different questions that I'm going to give you and apply them specifically to this sentence. As you get familiar with this so what test, you're going to be able to expand that, apply it to multiple sentences, apply it to whole paragraph, to whole sections of your paper. The goal here at the end is to be able to find those places where attention is going to wane, where you're going to lose your reader, where they're not going to follow you, where they're not going to understand something. Apply the so what test to these parts of your paper and fix the writing here such that you have concise and clear writing that your reader is going to be able to understand and follow. So for right now, just work on picking a sentence. Later, you can go back through and redo this for whole paragraphs or sections as you need. So getting started, the 5 questions of our so what test. Question number 1, does this sentence add value? We're going to use this first question to remove any kind of vague or unimportant words or phrases or sentences or whatever from our manuscript. So when we ask, does this sentence bring value, we want to really be asking, what is the reader learning from this? Are they learning something important? Are they learning something necessary to advance the story that I'm telling here? Or is this just something that I feel like telling or want to tell or think maybe somebody needs to know? So here we want to be honest with ourselves about what the story is that we're trying to tell and make sure that every sentence or every part of our writing fits into that story. This is also going to help with structuring your document in terms of context, because I want you to also ask, does this sentence add value here? Instead of just asking, does it add value in general, make sure that the value that it is adding or bringing to your document is maximized in the position in which this sentence is currently sitting. It's very possible that you have a sentence that is adding value, but in another location, and we will get to that in a minute. So that brings us directly into question number 2. What does the reader learn from this sentence? Because it's not just important enough that your reader learns something from every sentence in your document. You want them learning the correct things and in the correct order and in a way that is not confusing. So if you can sit down and think about what is the message behind this sentence, you can help figure out if first you need the sentence at all, because maybe you don't. And second, maybe the sentence is not in the correct position. So go back and ask yourself, what is the reader learning? And determine if that is an important thing to learn here in this position in this manuscript. Question number 3, is the point of this sentence clear, or is it maybe too vague and convoluted? This question I really love for helping to clean up convoluted or unclear statements or unclear sentences. This is the first question where we're starting to get into writing style and seeing how we're writing the sentences affects the meaning behind that sentence. Because here, what I see often, especially in writing for the hard sciences, is the point of the sentence gets buried far towards the end of the sentence in the back after a whole lot of technical terms have been thrown at the reader. And so what happens here as a reader, when you're trying to read the sentence, you have to hold a whole lot of technical information in your head to just get to the point of that sentence, to figure out what all that technical information means and how it fits together. What we want to do instead is bring the point of this sentence to the forefront. We want to make it obvious. We don't want to hide it. We don't want to bury it. We want to make sure that anybody reading the sentence knows why the sentence is there, what the point of it is, and basically what we want them to learn from this sentence. If you read the sentence and you're unsure for yourself, sometimes it's very useful for people to hear these things out loud. So in Microsoft Word, there is a text-to-speech dictation. You could turn that on and have Microsoft Word be reading these sentences out to you. While this is happening, see how well you are doing at keeping track of all of the facts that are being thrown at you and how far into the sentence you have to get till you figure out what the point of that sentence is. If you don't have Microsoft Word, you can also use any kind of translation software that will read this out loud to you. You can find something online. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Additionally, if hearing it doesn't work for you, try paraphrasing it. Try rewriting the sentence in a different way. This often also has the bonus added effect of helping us to figure out when we've basically already said something but in kind of a different way. If you've reworded the sentence and it looks a whole lot like some other sentences around it, then this is also maybe an indication, back with some of the previous points, that this isn't a sentence that you need in this paper. So if you've determined that you have this convoluted and messy sentence, what we want to do instead is bring the point of this sentence to the beginning and putting it in lay terms. What I mean by this is there's very often a part in every sentence where we're like, and we did this and this and this and this and measured this and looked at that to determine this. And this to determine this is actually the point. That is the key part of the sentence that you want the reader to get. To do this, okay? So what I want you to do is write to do this in very simplistic terms, and then you can move on with the rest of your sentence, adding in what you did, the technical details, the results that you saw. But in this way, the point is at the beginning, it's in lay terms, so all the readers of your audience are going to be able to understand it, and then as they are reading through the rest of the sentence, they're able to slot in the information that you're giving them. It already makes sense to them in their head, and they can read it in a more organized fashion. This is going to greatly improve the readability of any of your documents. Next, this one's one of my favorites because it really helps writers think deeply about what they're writing in each one of their documents. Question number 4. If I removed this sentence, paragraph, section, whatever, does the meaning of my document change? This question is designed to help you catch repetitiveness, wordiness, or any repeated parts of the manuscript. If you can delete something and the meaning doesn't change, then it means you've already said it enough in different ways throughout the manuscript, so you don't need to keep it there. This also helps with something I see often in science writing, where we tend to go out of our way to avoid directly stating something in our paper. Instead of directly stating, we saw this and we think it means this, it's always, this experiment allowed us to be able to measure this thing, which allowed us to be able to make the assumption that maybe there's a hypothesis that it's this. Okay? We don't need to do that in our science writing. You can take a stand because this is going to be your paper or your writing. People will know that this is your opinions and they will know that this is your conclusions. You don't want to use all of those words to say that. For trying to find these, look at how many words are between the subject and the verb of your sentence. Most of the time, the subject and the verb should be really close together. Like, we measured this, okay? So your subject is we, your verb is measured. But where this is going to come in the most handy is where you start to see things like, and this allowed us to be able to measure, okay? We measured, and this allowed us to be able to measure, or conveying the same information in your paper, except one is going to be clear, concise writing, and the other is going to be convoluted writing that we often see in science papers. So, use this question, go through, delete chunks, see if you need them, see what it changes, because this is also an interesting exercise too. And help you use this to focus down into what the core message of your story is without all of the fluff and extraneous wording that we need to add between ourselves and that story. Question number 5. Is this point understandable for my audience? So this is the question where we start digging into how we are writing, and this usually comes in terms of technical terms or technical concepts. What you want to do with this when you ask, is this understandable to my audience, is make sure every single part of this sentence is understandable to every single person who is in your audience who is going to be reading this journal. So this question is designed to make sure that your writing has the context that you need for every reader who's going to pick up this document to understand it. This means, are all my abbreviations defined? Are all my terms understandable or explained? Am I avoiding jargon, or at least explaining my jargon if it's common jargon that I want to use? Or is every experiment that I did explained in such a way that the reader knows what the experiment is, what I measured, how I came to my conclusions, all of these things. This is what is going to help take you from very dense, complicated writing to something that is easier to understand. It's something that somebody can pick up and look at and read without having to Google every other term in this paper. So to figure out how to do this exercise. Determine your target journal for whatever you're writing, or the target of wherever you're sending this to. If this is a grant, that can be the grant committee. And you want to figure out then of your target audience, who is going to be receiving this document, who is going to be reading this document. You need to determine the highest level college course in your topics that all of the readers of your document are going to have in common. As an example, so maybe you are submitting a computational biology study. Now, if you are submitting this to the Journal of Computational Biology, you'd be able to assume that all of your readers have computational experience and biology experience. So you would not need to explain some of the basic concepts of these two fields to those readers. Now, if you were going to submit this to a different journal instead, a higher level journal like Nature or Science, you can't make the assumption that everybody knows computational, because a lot of people will not. This means that you're going to have to go through your paper and make sure every computational term and concept is defined or written in such a way that every reader is going to understand this, even when they do not have this background or they do not have any experience in this topic. So with this question, when you're going through your writing, every sentence, every paragraph, whatever, make sure that every term, every concept, every experiment, whatever it is written in such a way that everybody in your audience is going to understand that. If that means you need to put a couple words here or there to add context, or if you even need to go a little bit further and add a sentence or something about an experiment that you did or a method that you did, that's what you need to do, because everything in this paper or this document needs to be understandable by everybody in your audience. So as a quick recap, the 5 questions. Number 1, does this add to my paper? Number 2, what does the reader learn from this sentence? Number 3, is the meaning of this sentence clear? Is the point of this sentence clear? Number 4, if I removed this from my paper, would the meaning change? And number 5, is everything in this sentence understandable to my target audience? So now we're going to go through an example of how you would apply this so what test to a sentence. So if you're confused about any of this, you're confused about how this might work in real time, you can follow along with us here and see how this works. So the sentence that we're going to use is, polymers have been recently applied to enhance therapeutics. Okay, so what? Let's go first to question number 1. Even if your paper is specifically about polymers and therapeutics, does this sentence add value to your paper? As it stands, my opinion is not really. This sentence doesn't tell the reader essentially anything. Considering this paper is probably going to be about some kind of polymer applied to therapeutics, anybody who is picking this up is probably aware that this isn't the first one. So there's no real facts here, there's no real new information here, and nothing that this is telling the reader. So what next? Let's look through some of the other questions then. For instance, if we removed this sentence from the paper, would the meaning be changed? Probably not. And the only way that it might change a little bit is that this sentence seems to be used as a transition point from how you're getting from point A to point B. So maybe you had recently talked about polymers and now you want to apply that to therapeutics or something. So this is just a transition sentence. Other than that, though, it's not really adding anything to the paper. The paper's probably not going to change if you delete this sentence. So to figure out how we might fix this sentence, let's dig a little bit deeper into the individual words that we're using here and seeing which ones are understandable and which ones are maybe not adding value, or where we might be able to add a little bit of context for our audience. So right off the bat, let's talk about what kinds of polymers. All polymers, some polymers, there's some polymers work and some not. What types of therapeutics? What types of applications? Let's also look at the word recently. How recently? In the past months, years, decades? Is this very new? Is this somewhat new? Is this only recent on the time scale of the Earth? Who knows? Also, what about apply? Are they applied in a lot of different ways? Are they applied in very specific ways? Are they applied as conjugation partners? Are they applied as nanoparticle carriers? This sentence doesn't give any specifics, but that's a shame here because this would be a good place to tie in some relevant research based on the topic that the writer here is presenting. Overall, sentences like this are really common in science, and I see them all the time. I bet you're going to be able to pay attention to this now and see how often papers start with sentences like this. They're just very vague, they don't give any specific facts to the reader, and I personally find them rather useless. Sometimes these help writers start to get words on paper so you can start thinking what direction you have to go in, but without applying the so what test to this sentence later, it often gets stuck in the final draft and just ends up sort of bringing down the overall quality of the paper. So instead, we're going to talk about some different ways in which we would be able to fix this sentence. I was starting to get into this a little bit more earlier, because the first thing that we're going to do in any sentence like this that is vague and isn't adding value is we're going to dig down and get more specific. We're going to make this sentence apply to our paper. We're going to give the reader actual facts that might be interesting. And this is a common misconception that the vaguer a sentence is, the more broadly applicable it is. And while that may be true, it's also true, the more vague a sentence is, the less people who are going to actually care about that sentence. Instead of having a very vague sentence then that nobody cares about, we can make a more specific sentence that our actual audience and the people that we want to care about this paper will care about. So that's what we're going to do here. So like I already got into it before with the specifics, we're going to talk about what types of polymers. We're going to talk about what types of therapeutics. And we're going to try to relate it instead to the topic of the paper. For instance, if this paper, we're using a conjugated polymer as a therapeutic, we're going to talk specifically here about conjugated polymers. And we're going to bring in something that the readers might find interesting. Maybe that is the history of polymers or of conjugated polymers, or how they started being applied or when they started being applied, or an interesting fact about therapeutics and polymers. Maybe it's how often they're used, or how much money they've made, or how many have recently been approved as drugs. So how might I change the sentence to make it more useful for our so what test? In the past 10 years, PEG polymers conjugated to fast-clearing therapeutics have been demonstrated to improve the circulation half-life. Notice that this sentence now passes the questions of our so what test. This sentence definitely adds value to our paper. We know exactly what the point of it is. It's specific enough that our reader is learning something from it, and all of the terms in here are written in such a way that everybody is going to be able to understand them from our target audience. So this sentence is going to pass the so what test. Notice this sentence also solves a lot of those problems we talked about earlier. It clarifies what types of polymers and what types of therapeutics. It gives the reader a fact that they might be interested in, adding value to this sentence and then adding value to this paper. Go back, read the two sentences side by side, and see if there's one that you would be more interested in reading. Now, a quick note here on as we're starting to get more specific. If the information that we're adding here to make this more specific makes this sentence look like the following sentences that come later, then what that tells us is we can probably just delete this sentence automatically. So if you're going through and adding the specificity makes the sentence look too much like all the others, then this is probably just one you don't need in general. You can jump right into the point with a later sentence. Let's look at one more sentence and one more quick example. The polymer developed herein showed a better half-life and less toxicity to match the desired therapeutic requirements. So while the sentence does highlight the results of this study, it is, again, almost too vague to be of use. The first thing that I'm flagging here, and the main reason I'm using this example, is terms like better, worse, higher, lower, more, less than, whatever. Comparison terms like that always need to be compared to something. This one doesn't compare it to anything. Okay, are these polymers better than previous polymers developed before this paper, previous polymers developed in this paper, the current polymers being used as therapeutics? Who knows? We have no comparison here. Additionally, these terms are in and of themselves very vague, okay? Better or worse doesn't necessarily mean anything to your reader. Is it marginally better, like 0.01% better? Because that's still better. Or is it 1,000% better, which is gigantic? Okay, so anytime you use comparative words like this, better, worse, more, less than, whatever they are, you want to make sure that the thing you're comparing them to is in the sentence, and you want to quantify this. Don't just say better or worse. Say how much better or worse. 5 times better, 10 times better. Okay, whatever it is, put these directly into the sentence. Another reason why I am showing this example is that this is one of those types of sentences that benefits from maybe adding a little bit more text to the sentence itself to help provide the context necessary for the reader. So instead of just ending the sentence like this is where a clause towards the end that starts with meaning or signifying or indicating or something like that gives the reader a quick little recap of what you want them to learn from the sentence. This can really help overall elevate the point of this sentence for your reader. So how I would change this sentence to pass the so what test: polymer drug conjugate MC121 therefore showed a 20-fold longer half-life than the drug alone, approximately 20 versus 1 hour, with no demonstrated toxicity in mice. This makes it a good lead target for the treatment of X disease, which requires a half-life greater than 5 hours to avoid constant infusions. Do notice here what we added to this sentence did make it longer. We expanded the text pretty dramatically here to get the point across. But I want the caveat here to be, if you are cutting context from your writing to fit word counts or to make something fit in the word count, you're cutting the wrong thing. More context is always going to be better for your reader, so you never want to cut the parts that tell them what your work means. You want to keep those in there and build around it. But like I promised at the beginning of the video, I have this bonus tip for you on how to reduce the word count. Because sometimes with the so what test, you are going to add a bit more wording, and even if you're cutting some sentences here or there, you may find yourself with way too many words for wherever you're submitting this to, and you need a tip for getting the right stuff in there and then reducing what you don't need. So, how to reduce the word count in your document, especially if you need to reduce a lot of words. What I want you to do is open a second blank document. So if you're using Microsoft Word, open a second blank page of your document. Then I want you to read through your document. And so normally when we're trying to cut wording, we go about it from the mindset of what is unimportant enough to cut. And we can usually get some words out, but people tend to struggle with this mindset. So with this second blank document, we're going to shift our mindset. Instead of thinking what is unimportant enough to cut, we're going to think what is essential enough to keep, and that's it. So I want you to go through and read your second document and copy and paste into the blank document only the parts of your document that you think are essential enough to your story that you need to keep. This fundamental mindset shift actually does wonders. Most people that I work with, most of my writers, when they apply this, they're instantly able to cut a much bigger chunk of words from their document than they ever were trying any of the previous methods. So if you are stuck with your word count, if you really need to dramatically reduce your word count, really try this mindset shift. And I don't just mean shifting your mindset, really truly make that second blank document and be copying those words over into that document. Okay, so this is the so what test. And I know this is a lot, and I know this sounds complicated, and I know you're probably thinking, oh my God, I never have enough time to write a paper. How am I going to have enough time to go through it like this every time? And the good news here is that you're not going to need to do this very often. It's not going to take you so many times of sitting down and reading your writing and looking at your writing and applying the so what test until you are able to just do this in your head automatically as you are writing. It's not going to take very long until you're sitting there, and when the words are forming in your head, you're already thinking to yourself, okay, where's the context? Where's the point? Can I put the point first? Can I define this word? How can I help the reader better understand this terminology? Is this too technical? Is this too vague? How can I qualify this better? Okay, so I promise it's going to get easier. It's going to get faster. And at the end of the day, you're going to be left with writing that is much more concise. It is much more readable for your reader. Your points are going to be clear, understandable, and most importantly, your writing is going to fall to the background, and it is going to let your work and what you did shine through. So put all your questions in the comments below, and even more importantly, if you have any sentences that you want help with or you want us working with you on to help make better or improve or more concise or whatever, add those to the comments below. You'll definitely get my feedback, and you'll get the feedback from everybody watching these videos of how they would help you improve your sentences. I hope everybody's now asking so what to everything they write. Happy writing. See you in the comments.